So we have on the line David Ben Moshe, who was recently refused an extension on his visa to remain in the state of Israel after he converted in an Orthodox manner. In other words, he's a 100% kosher Orthodox Jew, and for some reason, the state of Israel refuses to process his application for Aliyah. David, can you tell me a little bit about your past? Can you tell me your story, how you came to Judaism?
Shalom, Asher. Just want to tell you that I'm very happy to be speaking to you right now. So a little bit about me and how I came to Judaism. I was raised in a religious Christian home, but Christianity just really never sat right with me. There's like a few things theologically that was just hard for me to kind of get around. Probably the biggest one was I was raised in Protestant fundamentalist, and the idea that we have this universal truth, and everyone in the world who doesn't agree with us, whether or not they've heard the news or not, is going to hell for eternal damnation. And so I kind of fell out of that as I got old enough to not do everything that my parents had me do, and then eventually went off to college. And college did not do so well, ended up dropping out, and then kind of needed a way to make some money. So I kind of fell into doing some bad things, which eventually ended me up in prison. And then in prison, I just happened to have some time and saw a guy who was reading something that, like, I couldn't read at all, and talked to him for a little bit. It turned out to be Hebrew Torah, and talked to him for a little bit, and kind of built a relationship, talked with him some more, and then eventually I just kind of decided that this was going to be the thing for me.
Wait. So you're saying that you met someone in prison, or you
met someone in prison?
Was it a chaplain, or was it someone in prison who was serving time?
Someone in.
Interesting. Because really, in prison, there's no hope for anything good to come out of there. Many people who come out of prison, in many cases, come out even more criminalized, but many times they become radicalized religiously, whether it's through the...
I would say in most cases that's the truth. Kind of, we have this system built where prison is 100% punitive and at no point rehabilitative. And kind of just being punished and then getting put into a worse situation when you come out without having that ability to re-enter society kind of does a great job of making people worse, and that's a big reason why we see such high recidivism rates in the U.S.
I'm very for Judaism to take an active role to help inmates rehabilitate themselves. Inmates get constant visits from pastors, from imams, even from Wiccans in the prison that I volunteered in, where they even have pagan services that are larger than Jewish services. And when our religion is built on the notion of tshuva, on change, on how God reached out to the Jewish people in our lowest hour, and he elevated us to these very high levels. But for some reason, it seems that Jews only care about blood and ethnicity. Now, Israel has had problems in the past with not just the Ethiopians, but the group in Dimona, and even with the Sudanese Christians who enter Israel trying to flee Islamic oppression. Do you think what's happening to you is almost an extension of this, because you are of African descent, correct?
Yes, I am a black male, and in addition to that, I've got a fairly long growing dreadlock, so I'm not trying to hide it. And going back to your question as to whether I think that's part of it, I think it very possibly could be a part of it. On a personal level, when I interact with people here in the state of Israel, I don't feel like I feel it as much. Now, I do have the advantages of being like an English speaker and from America, but I think that it's more of it can be held as another strike against you when there's already strikes to be held against you. And then so being a convert on top of having a criminal history and then add black to it just starts to get to that point where you've kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back almost.
Do you find support from other blacks in Israel, like Ethiopians? Do they come to your cause?
Yes. So we just started publicizing the cause because we've just been waiting for the response. And this is the first time they've refused me a visa while I've waited. But so far, definitely have seen some support from the Ethiopian community. And just when we see each other on the streets, we always end up in conversations, and it's very nice to be able to connect with them.
I think this is the biggest downfall in the whole argument of nationalism versus an actual religious state. The land of Israel was founded to be a place where people who keep Torah are allowed to live. But nowadays that you have a government deciding who it allows in, for example, I know that it's much easier for someone from the former Soviet Union or even an atheist with Hebrew pedigree to enter the land of Israel than a convert from the States or from Europe or from Africa.
I would definitely agree with that, especially when we talk about the terrible situation that happened with the members of the conservative Ethiopian community, where they were just all, as a community, denied the ability to make Aliyah, when if you're a conservative convert from Europe or America, you don't have that same issue.
Also, I remember when I was living there, where they were offering Russians a double sal klita, like a double absorption basket to move to Israel, just because that's what they wanted. Where they want people who aren't too religious, who are definitely going to serve in the army, and who fight against the average person who makes Aliyah, because the average person who makes Aliyah from America does so because he's religious, while the average person who makes Aliyah from Europe does so for economic reasons. This is why having a secular state is not always such a good idea, and it's hard for them to claim to be a Jewish state when they have all these underlying factors determining who they allow into the country and not adopting a Torah standard of who is an Israeli or who should be allowed to live in the land. Now, why did you choose to move to the land of Israel?
So I was at a time in my life where I had the ability to basically move anywhere. And the reason for that was because I had recently applied and got into a graduate program in Florida. And then after being accepted to the graduate program and denying acceptances to other graduate programs, at the very last minute, even though I informed them of my criminal record beforehand during the application, they denied me the ability to register for classes. So I thought to myself, with kind of this freedom, because I'd closed down my business, ended my lease, and was prepared to move, like if I could move anywhere in the world, where would I move? And the answer was Israel. So then I came over for a pilot trip to Israel to see how I like the country. I'd only been previously before on Birthright and just loved it just as much and still in love with it and just want to stay here.
I'm glad to hear that you found your besheret while you were in Israel. In 1 year, you're already happily married in the land of Israel. There's many people who move there for many years have a hard time finding a match. How'd you meet your wife?
So actually, I met her on the internet. Yeah, and then we met here, and just from the first moment we met, it seemed right, and we just progressed on, and it's definitely a giant blessing that it worked out like that.
This is what makes it even worse what they're doing. You're actually married to an Israeli citizen, and they have no problem trying to destroy a marriage just because some politicians perhaps may not like the color of your skin or your background, right? And completely ignore the fact that you're religious. I mean, most people don't know that the state of Israel is a secular country, right? And the average individual in Israel doesn't even really believe in God. That's something you only realize once you live in the land, right? If you're on Birthright, if you're on any organized trip to Israel, and you're in Jerusalem, you think everybody's religious. But the people who run the country there are they have more loyalty to ethnicity than they do to religion. And it really reminds me of the disgusting history of how this country was founded, how they would take Yemenite kids from mothers. They told them that they died at birth, and they would sell the kids on the black market or like ship them off to secular kibbutzim. In other words, it's more about business than Torah. It's more about business than religion. It's more about nationalism, but without God. I hope everyone listening today could do whatever they can, call whoever they know in the Knesset, in the Rabbanut, in the Sochnut, in the Mizrat Panim, and let them know that they're not happy with the way they're treating David. Is there a message that you want to give over to everyone listening?
Well, first, I hope everyone listening a happy Hanukkah, as the holidays are a great time to be with the family and friends and enjoy it, and just to kind of remember that change is possible. We all have the ability to grow and evolve, and the world does not magically become a better place. It becomes a better place because we put the effort in and we make it a better place. If you want the world to change, it starts with yourself. First, you have to change yourself to bring that into the world, and then start helping others to change as well. And that's kind of the thing I've dedicated my life to, is helping other people change, because that's how we create this world that we all want to live in, and we can finally have some peace.
And I appreciate you taking the time and speaking to me. And that's what I did when I was working in the prisons. I would try to speak to as many people who want to learn. And there's a lot of people who want to learn. This is why we have the Black Hebrew movement. But the reason this movement was created was because it was trying to fill a void. There's a lot of people who don't believe in Jesus no more, who believe in Torah, but the rabbis don't want to reach out. So what do? They did the same thing that the early black Muslims did. They formed the Nation of Islam, and this is the Jewish version of the Nation of Islam. And it was really formed out of resentment, because you had a community searching for the truth and you had no one there to offer them that truth. The way you fight bad religion is with good religion. So we have to give people an alternative to their past. If you live in Israel, that would be radical Islam. I was always for offering Palestinians an alternative to radical Islam.
Yeah. I would definitely add to that also that in addition to providing good religion to stand in the place of bad religion, we have to make sure that we ourselves are good examples, because whenever one of us does something that's wrong, that is a reason people point to us as bad religion as well, which is another thing we have to fight.
I hear you. I also made Aliyah. 13 years ago I made Aliyah, and I lived in Israel for about 4 years. And I had to get my conversion proved by the Rabbanut. And I actually have 2 conversions. I converted first conservative, and then I converted Orthodox. And I jumped through all the hoops, but I saw the article that they wrote about you on Ynet.
Yeah, the article came out very, very well. I'm very happy with that article. Mm-hmm. Definitely been jumping through hoops.
For how long have you been in Israel for?
So I've been in Israel since July of 2017.
So the Rabbanut is giving you a problem because they don't recognize the rabbi who converted you, or what's the issue?
No, so the issue is, before I converted, I had a criminal record in the States, and because of that, the law of return has a clause that if you have a criminal record and you're deemed to be a danger to the community, they can stop you from making Aliyah. And then the person who decides that is the Minister of the Interior, who is Aryeh Deri. And we've just been unable to get a response back on my application.
When I was living in Israel, Shine was trying to convert in Israel, and he said that he was from Jewish origins. He said his mother was an Ethiopian Jew, but they wouldn't even meet with him to reconvert him because they didn't like his music. You heard about this?
I've heard that he came here. Actually, a funny story, he is from the same country as my mother.
From Belize?
Yeah.
He actually lived there for a few years. He would renew his passport, but he couldn't make Aliyah officially because they wouldn't grant him a conversion. What city are you from in the States?
So I grew up outside of Frederick, Maryland, but then I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I've been the last previous 7 years before I came to Israel.
Do you know if Israel has this policy for anyone who wants to make Aliyah, or just converts?
I believe it's for everyone. I know that they now require that you bring an FBI criminal background check.
I made Aliyah from the States. The Jewish agency, They make you go get your own background check, because if they pull your background check, that background check, it's not going to include your criminal record from before you were 18. But if you go as an individual to the courthouse, that you can request records from before you're 18. So that's what they made me do also. I made Aliyah when I was in my early 20s. And it was based on that whether they approved my Aliyah.
Now they will let you order it from the FBI's website. So for me, I had my FBI background check ordered from the FBI's website to my parents' house. And then my parents, who, Baruch Hashem, live near D.C., took it to the office to get the apostille stamp. And then actually my roommate at the time was back in America, and he's from Rockville. And then they met with him, gave him the document, and then he flew back over with it.
Have you met any Jewish people who've been through this same issue? Because I know there was a famous story back in the, I think it was back in the 40s. Was it that Meir Lansky was trying to make Aliyah and they refused his Aliyah because he was a criminal?
Yeah, that is the most famous story. Yeah. I know one lady who said that her brother had drug charges before he made Aliyah, and they gave him no trouble at all, but that was, I think, 15 or 20 years ago. And then I've had a few people tell me personal stories of people they know who made Aliyah more recently, who were convicted of child abuse crimes, who made Aliyah.
Where are you living in Israel?
So I'm right now living in Beit Zayit. Are you familiar with it?
No. Beit Zayit.
So it's a little moshav just outside of Jerusalem. Like, we're still on the Jerusalem bus system. We're actually in the middle of the Jerusalem forest. And if you're in Jerusalem, you're going out to like Ramat Mota or Mota Ali, around there, like we're around that area. Actually, the closest neighborhood to us is you can like see Har Nof, and like if you want to walk to Jerusalem, you can walk to Har Nof in about 30 minutes.
So you're closer to like Mevaseret?
Yeah, very close to Mevaseret.
See, we used to do paintball there. I mean, there aren't too many places to play paintball, but yeah. You couldn't extend your visa? Honestly, I've known Jews who lived in Israel for over 30 years who just every 3 months extend their visa. I mean, back then, people would just like drive to Jordan or fly to Cyprus and just come back in.
So that is kind of the main issue right now, is that the Ministry of the Interior has put a ban on me from extending the visa. And when we ask them why, the only thing they can tell us is that so that I cannot remain in the country if my application is denied. So that's kind of the initial court petition, is for them to extend my visa. And then, speaking with the lawyer yesterday, he also said that we have reason to believe that they are trying to use this as a way to deny the application and remove the recourse as far as the appeal. So we're applying for a court motion to grant me a visa to remain here and legal status under the arguments that I'm Jewish. I've got a pending Aliyah application. They just haven't answered for the last 7 months. I'm also married to a Jewish Israeli.
So how were you married? Were you married in Israel or in the States?
Yeah, in Israel.
So the Rabbanut married
So
you.
we went through, Rabbanut so far.
Now, like, if someone makes Aliyah, even with a non-Jewish person, that non-Jewish person gets citizenship, they would be willing to kick you out, even though you're married to an Israeli citizen?
That's what it appears to me.
Do you think they would do the same thing to a white individual who converted, who also had a year past?
I think it's much less likely. I don't want to say that they wouldn't. Again, you brought up the previous example of Meir Lansky, who is a white Jewish person, but it just seems in the current environment that it would be less likely.
Meir Lansky is really not a good example because you converted. Like, you did tshuva. Like, Meir Lansky was still a criminal. Like, he was running away from the law. Right? So, again,
yeah, as opposed to me, who got released early for good behavior, got off probation early for good behavior, and I've even done volunteer projects with the Baltimore Police Department and have references from them.
I was an assistant chaplain in Virginia, in Petersburg Federal Prison. The Jewish outreach presence in prison is almost non-existent. The Muslims are huge. We used to have to share...
The Muslims are very huge.
So we'd have to share like a chapel. So we'd have to schedule in how many people would be attending the service, or more or less. And the Muslims, the black Hebrews, they're growing mainly because of outreach. It seems that if a person sees the light, the true way, Judaism, in their lowest hour, and they repent and they come to God, I mean, that's not good enough. While an atheist I mean, someone could not believe in God and still get citizenship to the Holy Land. There seems to be something really wrong with that, you know?
Yeah, and I would agree that there should it's fair for them to have a slightly longer process and to check into me because I've got a criminal record, and it's a fair thing for the state of Israel to not want to let active criminals into its border. But there does come a point where it's just kind of ridiculous. Because you get to the point where I don't understand what else I could possibly do to show that I've done tshuva.
So you converted with an Orthodox Beit Din in the U.S.?
Yes.
Did they give you any hard time there?
No.
Converted in Pikesville?
So I studied and my sponsoring rabbi of Baltimore, Maryland, and then we did the actual Beit Din and the mikveh at Ohev Shalom in D.C.
It's a Jewish agency that's giving the problem, or is it the Rabbanut?
So it's neither. The problem is the Ministry of the Interior.
So that's Mizrah Panim?
Correct.
They've been trying to outlaw the ability for converts to make Aliyah for many years. Last I heard, Shas partnered with Israel Beteinu. I'm talking about probably 5 years ago. They just want born Jews to be able to receive full citizenship. This could in some way be tied to that.
It very well could be. I mean, it's one of those things where it seems like it could be just administrative falling back, but it seems like according to the word in the law, when you have someone in my situation, it just becomes the personal decision of one person who is obviously very busy being a minister of the Knesset, and there should be a way to efficiently get it done. And if there's not, I should at least be allowed to stay in the country with my wife while they get that process done.
How long have you been in the country so far?
Since July 2017.
So do you see it getting better in terms of your chances of staying, or worse?
Honestly, I do not know. It seems that things are going to be moving forward now because we're proceeding with the legal case. But again, we don't know what the initial response to the Aliyah application will be. And obviously, if it's denied, we're going to appeal because I've got a wife and a family here.
I think a lot of people sympathize with your story because this could happen to any of us. People don't know that we're always just a hop and a skip away from being locked up ourselves. I knew a rabbi who went to jail for reckless driving. He was driving over 90 miles per hour. He had to spend over a week in jail. If someone doesn't believe in tshuva, or doesn't believe in even just being at the wrong place in the wrong time, is in some way going to use that to ruin someone's life or stop someone from progressing, it hits home. I mean, think about it. Like if I would have got caught for any of the things I've done before I was Jewish, I'd be in your position. And I made Aliyah.
And I would think that if anyone understands that, it would be Aryeh Deri. I mean, after his legal troubles and the ability for him to make tshuva and return to a prominent role, I think that he should be, if anyone understands it, it's something that should be granted to other people as well.
How can people get involved? Is there somewhere that they could write letters or emails to help your cause?
Right now, if they're Israeli citizens, they can write letters with their Tudat Zehut to the Ministry of the Interior, and then also by supporting with the legal fees on the GoFundMe page.
So how can they reach that GoFundMe page?
So it's GoFundMe, Stop the Deportation of David Ben Moshe. I can also send you a link if that's easy too.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Put in the show notes for.
Yeah, please